Morning. So we're in this Old Testament series, and it's on specifically the life of Samson, this character that most of us have at least a little understanding on. Apparently there's a movie out about Samson. I didn't know this, saw it yesterday. I think you can get it on DirecTV, Dish Network, something. You can order this thing. I've never seen it, didn't even know it was out. It didn't have Bruce Willis in it, and things weren't blowing up, so I didn't see it yet. But Samson is a guy that falls. He falls in this what with the nation of Israel is a 400-year period. There's a 400-year period where with the nation of Israel, God uses these guys called judges to try to rescue them, not to try, but to rescue them. Here's what the nation does. Israel does this. They're supposed to be God's people. They're supposed to walk with God, to be separate from the pagan culture. It's not a commentary on ethnicity. It's a commentary on they're supposed to be God's people. They're supposed to listen to God, follow God, do what He says, be set apart from the world around them. But they're like we are, right? They mess up, they disobey. So here's what they do. They obey God a little, then they disobey. They obey God a little, they disobey. And this is all happening over a 400-year stretch. And when they disobey, God does with this nation, much like you, if you're a parent, would do with your kid. What do? You kind of swat their hand. Now, I'm sorry if you don't swat your kid's hand. I'm just saying, you know what I'm saying. You correct your kid, right? Yeah. You just heard my dad. We use the belt at my house sometimes. No, way too big for that now. Hey, he disciplines people, right? And so the nation is going through this period of discipline. And what happens is he uses these guys called judges to go and help deliver his nation, to bring them out of captivity after they've kind of been disciplined. So we're in this period where Samson is a judge. And Samson, as we're learning 3 weeks in now, is not a great judge. What's so funny is he's got a pretty good family. Like his parents are followers of God. They're teaching him the right things. They responded to the vow that God said, I want Samson to be a Nazirite, and it meant certain things. And they taught him in all of those ways. But they kind of let the culture in, and they compromise a little bit here and there, but they're still good people, right? I mean, in the sense that they're not as evil as they could be. And so they're raising Samson, and Samson's going along, and he's had a pretty good life, but he just doesn't follow God like he's supposed to, like his vow calls him to. In fact, I heard a pastor say it this way one time. He said, Samson's the kind of guy that sorry, ladies, maybe you watch a lot of football, but this is a football illustration. I mean, if you're watching football, Samson's the guy, the receiver, that catches the ball, goes into the end zone for the touchdown, scores 6 points, spikes the ball, does this big dance, in spite of the fact that his team's still behind 42 points, right? He's not getting it. He's stuck on himself. And we saw that last week, that his pride gets in the way. This week, we're going to see his pride take over even more. And what happens is it leads to a lifestyle. It leads to a lifestyle. Last week, the antidote to pride, we flipped over to the New Testament, and Paul, this guy that had persecuted Christians, he actually, when he had this encounter with Jesus Christ, a resurrected Jesus Christ, he had this epiphany. He understood what God was trying to teach, and so he gave us an antidote for pride. It's in Philippians 2. He says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility, count others more significant than yourselves. Do you want to know what the antidote to pride is? To focusing everything in your life on yourself? Focus on others. Focus on others. We even said it this way. We said, love all people all the time. Like, that's the antidote. If you're going to learn anything from the life of Samson, that's what he should have been doing. But he doesn't do that, right? In fact, he continues to let pride just stir him up, and he does his own thing. And what happens is he eventually begins to live this life of just incredible loneliness. And that's what takes over. The first week we looked at the life of Samson, we saw that he decided he wanted to marry this young Philistine gal. Now, part of the problem is, remember, I keep telling you, it was not an ethnicity issue. It wasn't her skin color that was the problem. It was her whole family. They didn't serve God. And they didn't want to serve God. In fact, they served pagan gods, gods that were completely opposed to who the person of God is. So Samson rushes out, sees this girl. Apparently she was pretty attractive, because he says to his dad right away, he says, hey, I need her as my wife. She's right in my eyes. She's right. Like I know what God says, but man, she is right in my eyes. And I add the little emphasis there, but I'm thinking that's probably what he meant, you know? He was attracted to her. He was overcome with passion and desire, and he decided, I don't care what God said, I want this woman. Now, we skipped a part, so I want to back up this week and pick it up there, because what happens is his dad allows it to happen. And so as he goes down to start to set up all the wedding plans, I want to pick it up in Judges 14, verse 10 real quick. It says, his father went down to the woman, and Samson prepared a feast there, for so the young men used to do. Now, we read that and we think, oh, well, that was an old tradition, an old custom. No. What do young men do today? They have bachelor weekends. Samson's gone down. He's going to have a bachelor weekend. Like we still do these kinds of things today. And it's up for him, and this is a tradition. And so he's going to go set up this big feast and have this party. But look at verse 11, because we read this stuff so fast. And listen, I missed this for years. I never saw this. Verse 11. As soon as the people saw him, that's the people in the town, not Samson's people, they brought 30 companions to be with him. They had to give him some groomsmen. Samson didn't have anybody. He was all alone. He showed up and he was going to set up this party, and the locals looked at him and thought, well, this is really sad. This guy didn't even have any buds. He doesn't have any dudes. He doesn't have anybody he's hanging out with. So hey, you guys, go be with him, okay? Make him feel good about himself. Eat his food. It's going to be good, right? They basically went out and got him groomsmen. The things he should have had himself, he didn't have. They went out and they had to get them. Now, if you're married and if you had bridesmaids and groomsmen, right? They're called groomsmen still. Groomsmen. If you have those people in your life, they're probably people that shared life with you at some point. They're probably people that were a part of your past. They're probably people that meant something to you, right? In fact, they may be people that you either still do life with today, or you could pick up the phone and continue doing life, right? Last November, I was down in New Braunfels. I go down a couple times a year, and I try to catch up with people. I have never really done this because sometimes my weekends are not easy for me to leave town. So when everybody goes down to do things on the weekend, I don't do that. I don't know if you realize that, but I don't get to leave town on the weekends like that. But so I go down sometimes during the middle of the week, and there's a thing in New Braunfels called Worst Fest, and it's a really fun festival with a lot of accordion music for you people that love accordion. All right, they a little bit of tambourine. I know Josh loves a tambourine. There it is. And they have this great festival. And I was down there last fall, and I'm just walking, and across the way I see a buddy of mine, Chris, a groomsman. He stood up at my wedding. We lived on the same street as elementary school kids, grew up together, got separated in junior high and high school, found each other again when we were back in a college group in college at a church in San Antonio. But our life has kind of been hit or miss, and you know, you would think, well, you never see him anymore. But when I saw him, we shook hands, we hugged, and we immediately started sharing life again. I mean, it was like we hadn't missed each other in a while. We started telling stories. Because that's what people do, right? That's what when you have a relationship with somebody, a companion, that's what you have. Are you aware that loneliness is at an epidemic level in our culture? Like not just being sad or not just having a couple of bad days. In fact, when doctors describe loneliness, and even people that have it, they will use this word all the time: a chronic ache. An ache, a pain, something that's so deep that it just won't go away. And it stays. And it gnaws at you, and it wears you out, and it makes you tired. That's loneliness. On May 1st, and this just happened, right? May 1st, Cigna, one of the biggest insurance companies in the States, released a new study. And they said this very thing. This is what they found out. That 54% of the nationwide study they did found that people were either always or sometimes lonely. 54%, over half of our country now experiences loneliness at a deep, chronic, aching level. There's another study that came out that emphasized the importance of that. Things like heart disease are now tied to loneliness. Genetic mutations are now tied to loneliness. Seriously, this is what our doctors are finding out. That if you're a woman and you're trying to recover from breast cancer, but you're lonely, your chances of recovery are much less if you struggle with loneliness. Loneliness is now described as a symptom for premature death. People die of loneliness. And the thing is, we've known this. We've known this for generations. I love it when the scriptures hits on a truth that we didn't expect or anticipate at such a time. If you were to look at the book of Proverbs, it's a collection of wise sayings from a man named Solomon. And Solomon said this millennium before we were even doing studies on it. Proverbs 17:22. A joyful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. People die of loneliness. It's not a surprise, really, that Fortune magazine made this statement in June of 2016. The author of this one article said, humans were not designed to be solitary creatures. We evolved to survive in tribes. We need to interact. The need to interact is deeply ingrained in our genetic code. That's a magazine that's not writing about the Bible or God, but it's an author who recognizes the reality of how we really are wired. Now, the truth is, whether or not you believe in the Bible, whether or not you believe or have all of your beliefs settled on how God created the world, the simple truth that still rings true and affects our worldview as Christians is this, that we were created to be communal people. We were created to live in community. We were created to be together. And so it really doesn't matter sometimes even what your belief on God is. Now I believe this morning as we look at this, I think God's got an answer for all of this, but some of you may not be convinced about that. But the simple fact is, even if you're not, if you're lonely, you're in trouble. If you're lonely, life's not good for you. You're not living the way God wanted you to live. You're not thriving. There's a professor and a church research guy, and he's actually a planting pastor as well. Ed Stetzer's his name. He made this observation very recently about churches today. He said, people are walking away from the church more and more regularly. Studies show that this is due to a variety of reasons, but at the top of the list is a lack of felt relational connection. One of the things we struggle with at Journey is these rows are great for a reason, right? They're great for a season. We sing together, we get encouraged, we hear things, we worship together, we study the verses together, the Bible together in rows, but you can't stay in rows, right? Life change only happens in circles. We always talk about that. Well, that's because that's where community happens. Community. We were made to be communal people. And that's why before Jesus ever left this, he prayed this prayer to God, and he said, Father, make them one. He prayed for our unity, not for our uniformity. He didn't pray that we'd all dress the same or look the same, right? He didn't pray that we would all be the same people. He loves variety. I love it when people of different backgrounds and different interests get together and learn to appreciate each other and not throw stones at each other. Why? Because God loves those differences. He loves a variety of backgrounds, but He wants a unified understanding of who Christ is. A unity, that we have to be together. That's where our community comes from, that we have a unity in who we believe Jesus Christ to be. But it's the loneliness that eats at the life of Samson. I want to leave Samson for just a second. I want to take you back to Genesis. Because the way we're wired, the way we're created, the way we've been put together matters. And the whole origin of how we got here. I know our culture right now is arguing about this. And to be honest, we've got to find a better way to talk about it. I understand that some of you might say, listen, Cecil, I just don't know that I can put up with this whole idea of 7 days of creation and 7 literal days. Look, just please, I'm not trying to say the Bible speaks to all of that. What the Bible does speak to is who created, the who behind the whole thing. It doesn't speak to all of the how. It wasn't meant to be a scientific book. But it does speak to the who. And when it speaks to the who, we get a new worldview then. In other words, we get a new way of looking at life around us if we understand who created us. And so in Genesis, we get into this creation account, and what do we see? We see that all of a sudden God starts to create things, right? He creates day and night, and he creates the beaches, and everything's really, really good. And then he starts creating things like kale and anteaters or skunks or mosquitoes. And the funny thing is after all of those days, all of those kind of creations, it always says in the Bible, it says, and he looked out and he saw it and it was good. And then he even creates man. He looks out and he goes, well, that's really good. But then all of a sudden, the first problem comes up. Right? The first problem comes up. And in Genesis 2:18, it says this, then the Lord God said, it's not good that man should be alone. Now, put a pin in that for a second. This is God. This is the God of the universe. This is the God that created everything, right? This is the God that knows everything. And we read this, and I think sometimes you can read that and you go, well, there was a mistake. Like he's creating and everything's going all along and he makes man, and then all of a sudden God goes, oops, I made a boo-boo. That's not how it plays out. He's got a purpose behind this. We're about to figure this out. But for our benefit, this is how it was written and given to us. He says, it's not good that man should be alone. He knew it wasn't going to be good for man to be alone because he created man a certain way. And then look what he says. I will make him a helper fit for him. I will make a helper fit for him. I always tell couples when I do weddings, it's really funny how God makes man. And then if you read the account, what he does before or after this verse, he sends man out. And he doesn't tell him, hey, there's a problem with you. I need to fix this. Instead, he gives man a job. He gives him a honey-do list. And apparently, Adam had nothing else to do because it seems like he did the honey-do list. And I look, I'm not trying to rag on us, but I need you to understand something. He didn't give Adam a job that would take like 10 minutes to complete, so that Adam would have an understanding. He sent Adam out and he goes, I need you to name all the animals. I need you to just go name everything. Name everything. Like I'm thinking, like, give me 6 animals. I'll take the 6. After 6, I'm hoping I go, there's a boy and there's another animal that doesn't look like the boy, but they're together. They're a pair. Okay, I get it. And after 6, I'm going, hey, God, how come I don't have that kind of thing? But he gives Adam, he says, no, you got to name all of them. So I'm guessing around 2,338, Adam finally goes, like there's a pair thing that's not happening here, right? Men, I'm not saying we're slow. I'm just saying it's what God did. But notice the divine, he didn't rush out and tell us what the problem was. He showed it to us. That's how good he is, right? You get that. That's his goodness. He's not being a dictator. He says, let me show you something. And Adam names this. And then he creates. And I want you to look, and we're going to camp out on this verse the rest of the morning pretty much. He says, it's not good for man to be alone. I will make him a helper. Underline that word helper. Just so that you can feel a whole lot smarter this morning. Here it is in the Hebrew. Show me the Hebrew word. Azer. Azer. He says, I want to make a helper. Now, let me tell you why this word's important, because we don't always pull out single words, right? You can get a little crazy with the Bible if you start taking it apart that much. But this word's important. You know why? Because the rest of the Old Testament, this word is used predominantly of God. It means rescuer or strength. Now, this is going to be a big deal, ladies. I want you to pay attention. I know it's the week after Mother's Day, but we're going to celebrate you all over again. This is a big deal. For the whole Old Testament, this word gets used of God, that he is Israel's rescuer. He's their strength. But in Genesis 2:18, he tells the man, I'm going to make you a rescuer. I'm going to make somebody who's strong for you. I'm going to make somebody, listen, that's not subordinate to you, that's not second to you, that's not lesser than you, that's not an add-on because I made a mistake. I'm going to make somebody that complements you so well because they bring to your world everything where you lack. It's a companionship. Now, I get it. In the New Testament, right, we get this ability to have relationships, right? And some people never get married, and it doesn't make them less complete. But at the beginning of this whole thing, when God is trying to teach us, give us a worldview, help us understand, and he says, look, here's the thing. I created you to live in relationship, to live in community, and that means you need somebody in your life. You need this person who is strong, this person who's not just like you, right? Not somebody who's subservient, not somebody who's lesser than you, somebody who's right in line with you, but has things that you lack at times. And likewise, men, you are an azer to your wife. It's not a one-way street. And so he creates this communal relationship, this thing that has to work together. And we see this continue throughout the cycle. In fact, all throughout the rest of the Old Testament, even though God is the azer, he's the rescuer, he's the power, he's the strength behind everything, he will use other people in that process. Think about Moses. Think about Samson. Think about these men that he used. Moses I love because if you know anything about the life of Moses, right, he did some crazy, crazy miracles, or God used him, right? God was behind them, but God used Moses, right? That was God's display of strength. He used it through Moses. It was still God in charge. And he started with marriage because he's teaching us about living in community. Here's the thing. Marriage was never meant to be a hierarchy. And unfortunately, church, many of us have gotten stuck in a really, really bad understanding that comes from the 18 and early 1900s. And we have this I saw a movie yesterday, or actually it wasn't a movie, it was a documentary because I'm weird like that. And you're going to really think I'm weird. It was a documentary on John Wayne. And it's crazy to watch some of those early movies, the behind the scenes stuff, and they would do clips. And he acted a lot with this actress named Maureen O'Hara. And if you don't know any of this, you really need to watch some better movies. And there's one scene, it actually plays out, I'm sure, in several of his movies, where he and Maureen were always this bantering, bickering couple. They were married a lot, and they would have this relationship. And invariably, at some point in time, John Wayne's character would take Maureen O'Hara across his lap and give her this little spanking as if it was going to whip her into shape. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, Lord, like if you watch that, please, that's bad. All right, that's not. We don't do that in premarital counseling around here. We don't endorse that. But it was in some ways this harmless thing from the early 1900s, and you watch it today, and I'm kind of horrified about it. I'm going, what were we teaching at some point that this was the perspective? It's about companionship. It's about the way you were created to walk with people. Marriage is not about a hierarchy. We were created to be communal, right? Community is the drive, is the divine norm at our created core. It's just who we are. She was created originally to be that helper, to be that power. And then if you push that just one step further, go back to Genesis 2:18, he says, I'm going to make a helper fit. Fit. The Hebrew word is neged. Now I'm going to make somebody that stands opposite of you. See, it reads so nice in English, right? I'm going to make a helper fit for you. That reads really nice. I'm going to make somebody who's got this power and can stand opposite of you. That's what the word means. I'm going to say stands kind of in your way. It provides a bit of a checkpoint. It's going to be able to say the things that maybe nobody else is going to say. It's going to challenge you. Write that word next to fit. It's somebody who's going to challenge you. I'll never forget the first couple of years Sue and I were married. We would have hard conversations and we were trying to figure out married life and how to do it well together. And she wouldn't listen to me, and that was standard. But at one point in time, we were having this really intense conversation. I don't know if she's in here, so I can say a lot of things right now. We'll see if she watches the video. We were having this really intense conversation. I could kind of see this light go on in her eyes, and it was one of those things where she had this epiphany. She said, "Oh, I don't have to believe exactly like you believe." Now, we were having a political conversation at the time, but it was one of those awakenings in her, and I had no clue that's what she thought. She thought to be a good wife, she had to believe everything I believed. She had to believe it like I believed it. And that's the thing, to really be a good wife, she needs to not do that. She needs to be opposite of me sometimes. She needs to challenge me on some things. And so sometimes that conflict we have in relationship with each other is God-ordained conflict. Listen, if all you're looking for is somebody to be a rescuer in your life, you're missing out on the confrontational side of it. You know what this is? This is just the person who's going to always tell you what you want to hear. This is the person that's going to bring the better out of you. That's going to challenge you. And it's not just marriage. We were created for communal reasons. We cannot live in isolation. If we don't, we're never going to receive the benefits. Now, I want to take just a couple minutes because I think there's some great benefits to pursue community. And I'm going to turn to Ecclesiastes. Again, another book by this really wise guy named Solomon. And you've heard this, probably read several times. If you've ever been to a wedding when they open the Bible at all, this verse comes up a lot of times. But there's reasons for us to really push into community, to push away from isolationism and to really force ourselves to do community and do it well, which means look for people who have this strength, have this power, have the ability to rescue, but also confront us with things. And here's the first one. Go to Ecclesiastes 4, verse 9. He says, 2 are better than 1, which any kid knows if they've ever gone to the donut table. 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their toil. In other words, community provides return. Community provides return. It gives us the ability to get something back. Now, we all love that when we're talking about money, right? I want a return on my investment. I want more money for my money, right? But it's the same thing for our relationships. If we choose to go it alone, if we let fear keep us from pursuing relationships, listen, you're going to get hurt. You're going to have to confront. You're going to have those hard days. But the reality is you're going to get a better return on your life. You're going to get a better return. Look, even wealthy people know this. You can have all the money in the world. If all you do is focus on your money, what's going to happen the day of your funeral, which we will all have that day, the day of your funeral, nobody else is going to be there but your money. Now, maybe you won't know, maybe you won't care. But the reality is you get a better return when you're in relationship with people. And I'm afraid, honestly, that in our culture, you know what we do? It's just easier to run. It's easier to run from family, from friends, and we've done that. And so we've created a culture that stays fixated on being busy instead of on focusing on getting a return, which is going to take work, it's going to take an effort. Go to verse 10. For if they fall, if these 2 people fall, or if one of them falls, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who's alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Community provides rescue. Being in community provides rescue. I know we don't get this much in our culture today. In their culture, it was a lot of hand-on-hand combat. They were mobile people, right? Their tent cities and all would move around, and they could be easily attacked. And so some of the ways they would defend themselves would be to get at least 3 other people and go back to back to back, right? So that as people would come at you, you could try to defend each other, and somebody had your back then. That doesn't strike as much to us today. We don't understand that concept as much. I mean, we understand it, but we don't have to pursue that. The reality is, though, if we go it alone, and we continue to be mobile in the cities that we're moving into, right? And listen, some of us have moved a lot in the last few years. And we keep thinking, well, we'll wait till we get to the next place and then we'll start setting up friendships because we're not going to be here very long. The reality is, if you're not going to be there very long, you need to set up friendships faster. Stop going it alone, or there's nobody there to rescue you because you don't know what happens tomorrow. You don't know about the accident. You don't know what might strike. What happens in your family? You never know. And if you've held off from community, there's nobody there to help rescue, help carry you through those hard times. Verse 11. Again, if two lie together, they keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? Now, you got to be careful with this verse in junior high students, but basically think of it like this. Community provides relief. You ever been on a camping trip, or you ever been at like a football game, or one of the last football games I went to in college, it was a 5-degree, it was a negative wind chill factor. It snowed like 3 inches during the game. And I wasn't leaving because I knew it was my last college game, right? I was not leaving the stands. So there was me in the stands at the end of that game. I mean, it was me in a 80,000 seat stands, and it was crazy. But what happens when you get cold? You start to shiver. What happens when you just get really bone-chilling cold? And it's hard to think, right? I mean, your whole body seems like it's out of control. You cannot control anything. And the only relief is to get somewhere warm. Solomon says, you want to know what it's like to be in community? You get relief. You get relief when you're in community. Like the burdens you have to carry, the things that happen in your life, the things that happen unexpectedly, the flat tires, or the kid gets sick and you're at work and you need somebody to go pick them up. All of that, there's relief when you're in community. But when you're not in community, it's like you're cold and you're just shivering and you can't shake it, right? Verse 12, one last one. And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, two will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. He's like, look, let's just play this thing out. It's just flat easier when you're out on the road of life and something happens. Community provides refuge. Community provides a safe place. Is community easy? No. No, it's not easy. But it takes work. For strength and power to be in your world, it also takes confrontation. So you cannot have one without the other. It's going to be an imbalanced relationship. It's going to be messy, right? We could probably go around the room and have everybody talk about a messy relationship you had this week in your life somewhere. Thank God for that messiness. In that messiness, there's refuge somewhere. There's refuge. So these are the benefits. You've got to return. You get rescue. You get relief. You get refuge. You get to have that protection in your life. Samson gave up all of that. He kills a lion that's coming at him. You think, oh yeah, but it's all about this supernatural strength. No, it's not. He wasn't supposed to touch dead animals. It was God rescuing Samson in a moment when he needed to be rescued. But the problem is Samson's alone when that happens, right? Samson throws a bachelor party. What's he doing? He's alone when he throws it. The next scene after that bachelor party, he gets in a fight with these guys. He fights 30 guys alone. Why? Because he's got no companions. He flees the area because now he's in trouble. He's killed them. He flees the area. He goes to hide in this cliff of this rock down at a place called Edom. He's there alone. He gets tricked by Delilah when he's alone. He doesn't have somebody in his life that he can go, hey, I really kind of like this gal. And this guy taps him on the shoulder and says, dude, she's a prostitute. Don't go there. I mean, you would think he'd recognize, but apparently he didn't care. He's alone. Eventually, he's going to wind up in prison alone. He's going to wind up grinding the grain of his enemies alone. He's going to wind up at the very last scene that we'll see. He will wind up chained to these pillars in a pagan temple alone. Chained there all by himself. It didn't have to be that way. It didn't have to be that way. And it doesn't have to be that way in your life. Right? Community is the divine norm at our created core. It's who we're supposed to be. We are created to be communal people. So, what does following God look like? It looks like surrendering to this way that He created us to be. Stop fighting it. Stop pushing away from it. Stop waiting until you move to the right next house, until you move to the right next area. Wait, stop waiting. Brutally honest, here's my wife will tell you this. I tend to wait for the right kinds of people, right? Like I have certain kinds of people that work best with my personality. And years ago, we kind of had this out. She's like, stop. Right? Get to know the people that are right around you. And that sounds really arrogant, but folks, that's when I'm left to myself, that's who I am. And that's who you are too. So journey. It's time to be communal. It's why we do community groups. Most of them are ending right now, but we'll start them back up at the end of the summer. But over the summer, we're gonna have little burger nights and things like that. Why? Because we're trying to foster community. It's why we tell you to get in a row with somebody. Get in a circle with somebody. Look for that relationship and stop waiting for it to be the right person who has the same age kids you have or anything else. Get in community because God supplied community around you. Stop running from it. Let me pray for us.